4 ways to know if your girlfriend is a borderline. Number 1, you see an awful lot of push-pull. So she's telling you that she hates you, she never wants to see you again, and the next minute you're the most perfect man and the love of her life and she never wants to leave you. Number 2, if you see her having a lot of interactions with other people in her life where all of the interactions are highly dramatic and turbulent, she's having fights with people, she's falling out with people, that's another way to know. The third thing that I would be looking for is a consistent pattern of behavior that's very self-destructive. Could be drugs, could be alcohol, could be actual self-harm, could be eating disordered related behaviors, but you are looking for consistent patterns of very self-destructive behavior. That also includes promiscuity, which basically manifests as a kind of self-harm. The fourth thing to be looking out for is extreme bouts of rage, like big bursts of aggressive rage and anger. If I saw these 4 things popping up consistently over time, not as a one-off, consistent across context, across time, I would be wondering if that person had borderline personality disorder. In many ways, living with somebody who has borderline personality disorder, it can be worse than if you're living with somebody with narcissistic personality disorder. The grandiose classic narcissist of narcissistic personality disorder can be satiated. If you give them what they're looking for, if you pay them compliments, if you are feeding into their grandiose self-image, they can leave you alone. It's cyclical, so they'll come back, they'll be hungry again, and they'll need refeeding again. But basically, you can negotiate with them and you can satiate them. Borderline personality disorder, because there's such a strongly labile sense of self, and that sense of self is cyclical. You might provide the satiation for one personality, and then her personality will show up in a different way, or his personality will show up, because there are plenty of male borderlines as well, show up in a different way, and they have different needs, and sometimes those needs are contradictory. So you find yourself in these weird arguments where they'll tell you, this is what I need from you. So you try and give them that one thing that they say that they need, and then it feels like 2 hours later they're saying, why are you coming at me with this thing? I hate that. And you'll say, you literally told me this is what you need 2 hours ago. And they'll say, no, I didn't. Now, I'm not the first person to say this. Like, when we look at BPD in action, not on paper, not as theory, but when you're actually around somebody with BPD, you will sit there and subjectively you'll think, maybe this person has got like multiple personality disorder, what's now called dissociative identity disorder. And the key word there is the dissociation. So when they are saying and doing things in one very intense emotional state, screaming, shouting in rage, crying, sobbing in sadness, it can literally be hard for them to access the memories of what they said in different emotional states. That's a very human thing. If you're in a very, very intense emotional state, you can experience having a different moral outlook, a different belief system in that state of rage than if you would in a state of bliss. We're all like this to some degree. We're all different right after a nice meal with your friends than you would be if you were playing a competitive sport like you're boxing or you're playing squash than you are. We're all different in different scenarios. People with BPD don't need the trigger of the stimulus of the environment to cause them to go into different personas and different styles. Their own emotional states are so intense that they basically create an endogenous environment, if you like. So I'm now in the endogenous, which means exogenous. If a drug is exogenous, it comes from outside the body. If the drug is endogenous, you're creating it for yourself. So they're creating environments for themselves. Here's something I want to add early on in this video, because it's very important. A lot of people are misdiagnosed with BPD who actually have complex post-traumatic stress disorder. It is better understood, it is better known now in their field of psychology, but not extensively so. There are even people, I am one of them, along with people like Professor Judith Herman of Harvard, who coined the term complex post-traumatic stress disorder, who would say probably we should do away with borderline personality disorder as a diagnosis, and it should be called, Judith Herman suggests, emotional dysregulation disorder. Because what's hard to do now clinically, and for people, it's hard for clinicians and it's hard for people who are living with people who have BPD, is to distinguish the nuanced boundary between Narcissistic personality disorder, especially when it's vulnerable or fragile narcissism, BPD and CPTSD. And I think the easier, cleaner thing to do would be to just divide it all together. But we still have the clinical diagnosis of BPD. There are people who've been diagnosed with BPD who will be in the comments. You'll see them saying, we don't have anything to do with narcissists. If you don't have anything to do with narcissism, and this is how to know, it's very simple. It's a complicated subject, but we should make it simple. If you're truly not exploitative and you're truly not entitled, like you don't feel like you have the right to exploit other people for your own benefit because of your victimhood. So you would be obsessed with your own victimhood. That's a sign of BPD. You would think that the fact that you have suffered gives you a right to take from other people without their consent, either by force or through coercion and manipulation. If you're not like that, that's not BPD. So I'm not just some weird conspiracy theorist with a YouTube channel. This is mainstream psychology. Many psychotherapists, especially those who have specialized for a while and working with people who've been diagnosed with BPD, would agree. If it's not got a hard core of narcissism in it, it's not BPD. What you have is CPTSD. So then you might say, but hey, look, Marsha Linehan created dialectical behavioral therapy and it worked for me. So that means because she created it for BPD, her dialectical behavioral therapy, and the fact that it worked for me, that proves that I had BPD. No, that actually proves that you had CPTSD, because you can't cure personality disorders. They're baked into the cake. They're consistent. They're permanent, pervasive, and personal, maladaptive coping responses that you can't get rid of through talk therapy. So Marsha Linehan's DBT, I think, is one of the best forms of therapy that's been created in the last 20 years. But in my humble opinion, she would disagree, I'm sure, with all due respect. It's actually what it's dealing with is CPTSD. Now, if your BPD, so-called BPD, was really just you in a series of emotional flashbacks and post-traumatic stress responses, and her DBT fixed that, if that works for you, then that's not a personality disorder. But yeah, hopefully that will help people to understand the difference between narcissism and borderline personality disorder. I highly recommend that you look up the works of Marsha Linehan and dialectical behavioral therapy, and also of Professor Judith Herman and complex post-traumatic stress disorder to know more. Don't take it from me, take it from the qualified professionals out there. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and for your attention. Domo arigato. Hello folks, just to let you know, we now have a new course out. It's finally finished. It's called Unplug from the Matrix of Narcissistic Abuse, and it's available from richardgrannon.com. Just hit this link right here and you can go get it.